MazdaSpeed 3 coilover install, step by step, no bullshit. Let's get straight into this. Coilovers I'm going to be using today are these BC Racing BR series. This is the extreme low version, and these are also custom spring rates. For the front are 14K and the rears are 12K. If your coilover kit does not have a top hat on the rear, you're gonna have to reuse your one from your factory suspension, just to note. And also, if you're installing coilovers on the second gen MazdaSpeed 3 and they are made for the 04 to the 09, you will need that specific rear lower shock mount bolt from the 04 to 09 Mazda 3s for your second gen Mazda 3 MazdaSpeed 3s. Now that we have all the important information out of the way, let's go ahead and install these on the MazdaSpeed 3. You can either start with the front or the rear, whatever you prefer. I personally do front to back. When you lift it up, you need to make sure that you're doing both left and right sides to take the pressure off of the sway bar so you can deal with the end links. Then obviously go ahead and take your front wheels off both at the same time. One thing I recommend is finding the points that you need to take off and spray them with some lubricating fluid because they're probably going to be a little bit rusty. Start by taking your brake clip out and then popping your brake line out of the strut. Now you can move on to your end link. You're probably going to need some sort of Allen head and a wrench to take this off. These can be quite rusty, so make sure you take your time. These can also range in socket and Allen head sizes depending if they're aftermarket or OEM, but they're probably going to be around 14 to 15 millimeter. Now believe it or not, you're pretty much almost done. You're going to take a 17 millimeter and take out the main bottom strut mount bolt. I like to use an impact gun just to zip this out really quick. Then we can work on beating the bottom shock mount out. There's different methods that you can do, but my trusted method is just taking a hammer to the knuckle. You can use a strut spreader. I've never used a strut spreader. I don't personally know how. I've just always taken a hammer to the knuckle, and as you can see, it slowly comes out. Then you can take your foot and take the rest of the strut out. Now you're gonna head to your engine bay and take out these 3 14 millimeter bolts. Take out 2 first, and once you get to the last one, you're going to take that out, but you're going to want to hold the strut with one hand as well. As you loosen that last bolt, then you can go ahead and pull the strut out with your hand. Here's a quick difference between the BC Racing and the OEM strut. If you need to, this would be the time to change over an OEM top hat if your coilovers did not come with them. As with the BCs, they come with camber plates, so that's not necessary for me. Putting back in your coilover is really easy. The top hat's shaped in a triangle, and as you would say, the top or the bottom point of the triangle has to be facing outwards of the car. You can go ahead and line up the top hat and start to hand thread your top hat bolt in. Now getting your strut into the knuckle can be a bit of a task. Go ahead and put your jack under your control arm and slowly start jacking up. Now on the back of your strut, there's a metal tab that sticks out, and you need to align this with the little slit in the back of your knuckle. Once you've lined up your strut with your knuckle, then you can go ahead and slowly start bringing your jack up to that where your strut goes into your knuckle. Now this is where things can get a little bit tricky. If you start to jack it up, you can wiggle around the strut and the knuckle to try and get as much force as you can. My personal method that's always worked is just using a pry bar, and you can get in that little slit in the knuckle and kind of pry it open like a strut spreader would. And once you've stopped, then we can go ahead and put that 17 millimeter bolt back in and give it a good tighten, and we'll torque it in a second. Take this opportunity with the strut jacked up to fully hand thread your top mount bolts right into the top hat. Go ahead and follow the same procedure on the other side. Now we're going to go ahead and move back to the end links, but in my case I had to turn the wheel so I could put my end links in. You go ahead and tighten these back up with your Allen head and your wrench. Make sure to plug back in your ABS cable, and then you can also put your brake line clip back in. Once that's all done, we're going to go ahead and start torquing everything down. Your 17 millimeter I like to torque to 80 foot-pounds. Your end links are rated for about 44 foot-pounds, and once you get to the top hat, I like to torque these only to about 25 foot-pounds. Normally I just do them very hand tight. So guys, now our front coils are done. It was actually really easy installing these BC Extreme Lows in the front of this car. Now that the front is done, we're going to throw those wheels back on and then pretty much go like this. Put the back on the jack stands. We'll start working on the back, but we're also going to put the front down to make sure that the ride height is drivable on. Now that you got in the rear of the car jacked up, go ahead and remove both rear end links from your sway bar. These are going to vary in size again, but you will use an Allen head and a wrench of some sort. There's going to be the bottom bolt and the top bolt. Now take your jack and place it under the rear lower control arm. You're going to then take a 17mm socket and go ahead and remove that 17mm bolt from your lower control arm mount. Once you've removed that, slowly bring your jack down while lowering your control arm so that you release the tension of the spring and remove the spring from the control arm. We're going to remove the bottom rear shock mount bolt. Take your jack, place it under the knuckle, take a 17mm socket and go ahead and remove the rear lower shock mount bolt. Now you're going to go ahead and find the two 12mm top shock mount bolts and remove those. Once you remove those, you can go ahead and remove the shock from the car. This is the second gen mount. It's a little bit, I think this is actually skinnier. And then this is the first gen mount where the bushings come out the side. You just need that longer bolt. I'm gonna anti-seize these because these tend to get a little rusty, but we go ahead and put these back in. Some setups are different. So with the BC Racing coilovers, you're gonna go ahead and take your bottom perch, put it into the control arm and take this big bolt that's supplied, tighten that down. Now go ahead and put your spring on top of the bottom perch. You're also gonna want to put the top spring mount in as well. Go ahead and take your jack and put it under the rear lower control arm. You're going to jack it up so that it meets the knuckle. You need to align the hole in the knuckle and the control arm and be able to fish that 17mm bolt right into there. It might take some wiggling and some time, but I'm sure you'll get it, and go ahead and tighten that down. Now we need to install the rear shock, but we also need to set the preload. Go ahead and continue jacking up your control arm until your spring meets the top spring mount. Keep jacking up that control arm slowly until you can't wiggle around that spring loose anymore. At this point, I like to give it about a half jack, which kind of represents almost 2mm. If you want to be accurate, you can go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and mount the shock by the top, and we're going to go ahead and hand thread these top mount nuts on. Now we're going to resize our shock, which just involves rotating the lower shock mount until it meets up and aligns with the bolt hole. Once you've gotten to that point, then you can go ahead and put that 17mm bolt right back in there and give it a good tight. You can go ahead and put your rear end links back in. Now we're going to go ahead and torque everything. Let's start with the top shock mount bolts. You're going to be 25 foot-pound. Your bottom shock mount bolt is going to be 80 foot-pound. Your rear lower control arm bolt is going to be 80 foot-pound. Your rear end link bolts are going to be about 40 foot-pound. And don't forget to torque your lug nuts when you're putting your wheels back on. I personally like to do 95 foot-pounds, but make sure to double check with your manufacturing book. Guys, the MazdaSpeed 3 is officially lowered, and I hope yours is too. Your next steps here, what you're going to want to take is that you've torqued all your suspension, but now would be the next step to take this for a drive and make sure it all works. So let's go do that. Don't be afraid of hitting like bumps and holes and stuff, right? You want to make sure that it's pretty sound. So far these springs actually feel all right. I was expecting them to be a lot stiffer, but this car is also pretty heavy. But yeah, everything's quiet. This is a successful install. So obviously, if you get a brand new set of coilovers like me, give it some time to settle, because obviously springs are stiff, which it might do sit a little lower, and things might also get a little bit more soft. This is a successful install. If you guys need any help with anything or have any questions, put it down in the comments below. I will get back to you as soon as I can. Coilovers can be a scary thing to do, but I've done this so many times, and those are the best ways of doing it, for me at least. As long as you give yourself enough time during the day or a weekend, of course, and you're new to this, shouldn't be too hard. If you guys want to learn more about MazdaSpeed 3s and watch the build, make sure that subscribe button. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching. Keep it real. I'll see y'all in the next one.